Hello, everybody. Once again, it is Friday. It is sunny. It's a bank holiday weekend. I hope that everybody is doing really, really well. And wherever you are in the world, that you are ready for the Get Hired LinkedIn Live Friday, 12 o'clock UK time comes along. And this week, we're going to be doing something that affects so many different people, which is age discrimination, age bias in hiring. I know it's something that really does affect an awful lot of people. Great to see. I can see quite a few of you coming in. Make sure you say hello and introduce yourself. Always good to see the different people that we've got coming into the session. Martin, great to see you. Hope you're well. Hello, your LinkedIn user. And also make sure you introduce yourselves, let you know whereabouts in the world that you are. That's always super useful and always really interesting. We get people from across the globe, not just from the UK, but also in the US, across Europe. We've even had people coming over from Southeast Asia and around there. So it's really good to see people. These things actually concern everybody. It doesn't actually matter where on earth you are in the world. Ageism is a subject that really does affect, especially when you're looking for a new job. Fergal, great to see you as well. Hope you're well. I hope you've recovered from last week. Hopefully the Get Hired mugs are winging their way over to you. So hopefully you will have got yours. If you haven't got it yet, then blame the postman. They're not the quickest. Poor Nena, when she got hers, it seemed to take her nearly 2.5 weeks to get it, which is not so good. Jane, great to see you as well. I hope the Netherlands is treating you well. Exactly. Thank goodness that it is Friday. It seems like it's always a long week. I don't know why it is, but it seems like it is there. David, always good to see you as well. I hope you're doing very, very well, and it's nice and sunny with you. Also, as well, happy Friday indeed. Have an excellent bank holiday weekend. It is. I don't think it's just the UK either. I think there's quite a few different places around the world that will be having that. And especially that if you are job seeking right now, it is an ideal time to actually connect, to make sure that you network. So keep going. Make sure that if you're creating content and you're putting some posts out there and you've started to do that, the weekend actually is a great time. And I want to talk about that a little bit before we get into the ageism debate. We're always here about creating content, putting yourself out there, getting yourself known, increasing your visibility, how important it is to make sure that people are reading what your content is. And especially we have this debate over whether or not you should post on a Saturday or Sunday. I'd be interested to see from anyone here, have you done that yourselves? You know, what do you do? Do you post, or do you decide not to do it? Now, there's a couple of different streams of thought here in terms of Saturdays and Sundays and what to do out there, and including bank holiday Mondays. So first of all, a lot of people tend to think, oh, well, people aren't on LinkedIn. You know, there's no point in doing it. There's less people there. It's not a work time, so you don't want to do it. You don't get as much visibility when you post at the weekends. I don't have enough time because I'm spending time with my family. Absolutely. And let's deal with that last one first. If you don't use it, the scheduling tool in LinkedIn is fabulous. I tend not to be posting on the day. Occasionally I will do, but I will make sure that I spend some time and actually schedule all of my posts a week in advance, 2 weeks in advance, so that I'm way ahead of it. So I'm not having that impact me during the normal work day or normal day, or even in a weekend when you've got time with your family, etc. You don't want to be sitting there doing social media posts. But so use that schedule as the first thing. The second thing, getting people to actually come back on a Saturday or Sunday. Some of my biggest impression and engagement posts have been at the weekend. It's probably a time where you'll find that everybody's on their phone at some point in it, and they tend to flick through. We're all used to doing it, and probably the apps that people will look through is your TikTok, your Instagram, your Facebook, and LinkedIn is one of those apps now that people will do. David, yeah, sometimes comment at the weekends. Absolutely. And it really does. It's amazing how much it will increase it. Now, if everybody else is thinking, I'm not going to be being active during the weekend, that gives you an opportunity to be able to, I mean, you're up against less competition. You're going to get more visible. More people are going to be able to do that for you as well. So don't ignore that. at all. I think it's really, really useful to be able to do it. Hi, Nena. Good to see you. I can't chat much today. Need to work before a murder mystery event at 12:45. I don't know whether we should be worried about that. I post at the weekend. It's fine. Exactly. It is. And I think you'll find that it's a good one. So if you're not posting at the weekend, I strongly suggest to try and give that a really good try at doing it as well. So look, we're going to talk a little bit about ageism today. So that is the one here. Why is it that we are talking about that right now? And it's because I hear from so many people out in the market and so many experienced hires, especially experienced candidates, who often will say the same thing to me, which is, I am applying for roles which I can easily do. I'm really qualified to it. I know I can add value to that organization. And I'm either getting an immediate rejection or I'm getting feedback straight back to me of usually you're overqualified. You've got too much experience for this role. We think you might get bored. And it smacks a lot that, is this got something to do with my longevity? Is this about my age? Is it because I'm over 45, over 50, over 55? Are people making assumptions about that? And they're saying, when did it become a thing that having too much experience or being too skilled for a role was a bad thing? When did companies think, I'm not going to hire someone who can do the job really well and add more value to my business, because I just don't want that. I want people who can only just about do the role and that's it. I don't want anything more. When did that become a thing? Have you experienced anything like that? And have you experienced anything similar to it as well? What's your view? It would be interesting to see your feedback. What have you had coming through from that? Because what I hear is that most experienced professionals right now are really struggling to get interviews. If you seems to be that when you hit a certain age, that it's really tough to do it. And why should this happen? Because ageism is very rarely discussed in recruitment as a whole. It's one of those things where everyone sort of think, well, we know we shouldn't really talk about it, but does it happen out there? Is it something that is considered actually acceptable in a workplace environment? And the reason why I say that is that in the UK and across many jurisdictions, across Europe, across North America, across many places around the world, there are a number of protected characteristics, and we're all quite familiar with them, whether it is gender and race, ethnicity, etc. But age is also one of them. And what's really interesting is that age is not something that is slightly less illegal than gender or ethnicity. It is treated exactly the same way. So from a company point of view, they should not be considering someone based on how old you are. That is the period thing. That is exactly where it should be. However, I'm sure that many of you are probably thinking, well, actually, yeah, that's all well, but I am actually getting that right now. I'm actually having that kind of experience right now, that I am getting people who are saying this to me. So how do I deal with that when age is legally protected, but it's still having an impact on it? You're still coming back with people saying, too experienced, overqualified, not quite the right fit. It's quite a tricky one. Andrew, I was made redundant yesterday. I'm so sorry to hear that. As partner sales manager, does ageism apply when AI bots are involved in the interview process? That's a really, really good question. And in fact, there is a court case taking place in North America specifically on against AI with Workday, where there had been some discrimination had taken place within that. And that's what the case is all about, is whether that actually took place. So it's really important to see whether that can happen. I think in actual fact, AI is something that is absolutely coming to us, and it's coming to the recruitment industry, and it's going to be accelerating more and more for that. But 100%, what we're experiencing right now is not an AI issue that you're being screened out of the ATS and this is what it's doing. It's just taking people over a certain amount of experience. They don't want that. It is a human thing. And I think that is the bigger issue we've got. There's got to be a lot more training, a lot more education, a lot more support, both in terms of hiring managers, recruiters, across both in-house to external agencies to ensure that this doesn't happen, that they're looking at skills and what people can do and the value that people can do bring to an organization, because that's the difference that it will make as well. And that's why I think it's really, really important. David, I had an interview last week, and the interviewer asked if the job had enough to keep me interested, as I had a lot of experience. Don't you just love that? It's another one of those things. So let's look on that one itself, David. Let's unpackage that a little bit. So what is it that they're actually asking? That, you know, you've got a lot of experience. Is it going to keep you interested? So you might look at it and think, well, why would too much experience be an issue here? And again, you've got to try and develop that in the interview process as to why it is that you are going to be interested in that. Underlying, I know what you're going to be thinking, because I look at the same way. They're looking at it and thinking, and it could be a number of different things here. They're looking and say, somebody's quite senior. Are they a flight risk? So in other words, when the market picks up again in 6 months' time, are you then suddenly going to go off and go and get something else because it's going to be offering you more money and you're going to go and everything? So there's that thinking. I think it's incorrect to think like that, because look, if you've got a compelling role for somebody and it's going to be right for you, it's a good fit, you're going to add value to it, and beyond that, all the additional things that you can bring to the business and as well, why would they even worry about it? So look, I think there is definitely an underlying issue there. It's almost this, we hear a lot about unconscious bias that you will have, that sort of subconsciously you have that impression of something you don't want to talk about. You may not talk about it, but there's that sort of natural bias that you have unconsciously. And I think there's a lot of work there that you can do to try and make sure that that doesn't happen as well. And I can see some more points coming through here as well. David, I applied for a job the other day. On the application form, they asked for your date of birth, which was a compulsory field. I thought it was illegal to ask for date of birth. I put 010101. Seemed to work. Exactly. Look, again, you raise a really, really important question. A lot of organizations do that. Now, you are absolutely right that date of birth is not something that can be considered during the recruitment, the selection process. What you will find when you get that is that internally in their recruitment department, if they've set it up correctly and legally, the recruiter will not be able to see that. They won't be able to view that information. So if they're collecting date of birth, they're collecting that, which they are legally entitled to do, in order to be able to produce their diversity data. So in other words, what type of people are applying for our role and what is happening to it. In some respects, that could be a good thing. So don't feel that it makes you feel uncomfortable, but don't feel like it could be a potential issue. Be reassured the recruiter won't be able to see that. They will not be allowed to do that, and they will not be allowed to select you based on your age. So it is purely a data gathering exercise. I tend to, with a lot of my clients, avoid asking those questions up front. Of course, once you get employed by them, you can do. But absolutely, a lot of them will tend to do that because they're trying to see whether or not they're being inclusive and what they're doing. Hello there, Pratibha. How are you? I hope you're well. Any tips for international students who are qualified but often get neglected or are not given a fair opportunity because of visa issues or something? I've been there in the UK and finally had to pack up and leave. I'm sorry to hear that. Look, it's a slightly different subject, but a tricky subject nonetheless. So there are two different areas here. Obviously, if we're looking at the UK, for instance, from a point of view of once you are offered a role and you are hired, then you have to be subject to be able to be legally entitled to work in that jurisdiction. So that can either be a visa that you've already got a working visa, or a sponsored visa that you have to have, or indeed that you are a national. So you have to prove that is the case. There is a bit of an anomaly of when you apply. So in the same token that you have to prove that right to work when you are offered the job before you can actually start employment, but you can't use that status in searching and selecting somebody. So during the actual recruitment selection phase. So I know it's slightly counterintuitive that that's the way that is. So what should technically happen is they should provide that opportunity for you to be able to be considered based on your skills and experience and where that is. And then if you are to be offered a job, you have to then obviously be legally entitled to work at that point. So there is a little bit there. So it is complex though, absolutely. David, I've seen compulsory fields for gender, ethnicity, sexual orientation, and date of birth. Absolutely. And that's that same point, that what they're doing is they are, when you're actually making that application, they're collecting data in order for providing diversity reporting. So that's what they're actually doing it for. What they should do is they should put a disclaimer on there when they're doing it. The disclaimer, if they're going to be asking for that information, the disclaimer will say that you will not be selected based on this criteria. It is being collected in order to assess our diversity and making sure that we are as inclusive as possible. So they should put that on a disclaimer. Unfortunately, an awful lot when they're putting it together and they're doing that, they just don't do it. And like you will probably see, like just about every job applicant out there, once you start getting that, you start questioning and thinking, what on earth is going on? I'm being asked all of these questions, which I know are illegal. Why are they doing that? Why? And if any of these protected characteristics, and especially when it comes to age, you naturally start thinking, well, that's it. Everything's stacked against me now. It's quite natural for that to happen. But be reassured, for that process, any information that you're going to be given, it should not go through to the recruitment phase at all. Andrew, good to see you. Do you think that sometimes the hiring manager is worried that you may be more skilled than the hiring manager due to experience? 100% that can happen. Absolutely. I've had exactly the same experience in my life. The same thing where I've interviewed and I've known that. In fact, I've even gone to an interview where the interviewer themselves has actually turned around, albeit it was a long time ago, and he said to me, he goes, I'm near retirement. He goes, and I've got a couple of years. He goes, he goes, you're a great candidate, but if I hired you, I think that in 6 months' time, you probably take my job. And which took me by massive surprise. And I had to really reassure him that say, I'm not after your role. But absolutely, I think people do worry about that. There is, that is an issue. And it's something that we can talk about in terms of how we can try and deal with that kind of thing. So I think 100% that's going to be something that is going to be a problem for you. Muriel, hi, good to see you. I'm Nigel, I miss your French posters. I'm back in the studio side, so we don't have the French posters behind, but maybe I should stick a couple up here just for you, Muriel. I think that would be quite good. Read date of birth. I've had to put it as a compulsory data also once or twice, but I will get caught all the time anyway, as I need to get them my share code, settled status, and they need my date of birth to see that I have a right to work in the UK. Look, absolutely, Muriel. So once you get to offer stage and you need to do that, you have to prove what your right to work, and obviously part of that usually is going to be a passport or something like that, visa status, etc. If you need that, that will have some of that information, and you are perfectly legally entitled once you take on an employer to take their date of birth. So that's perfectly acceptable to do. So there's no legal requirement on that. The bit that is protected is that they can't use that as a selection criteria. So what they cannot do is they can't say, you are only 20 years old, I want somebody who's 25 for this role, or you are 55 years old, I wanted somebody who's under 40 for this role. That you can't do. So we can't do that. And you know what I will always have happen throughout my career in guiding the business to be able to do that, both recruiters and also hiring managers, is to say we need to take that back. What we need to do is look at the skills. What are the things that you need, the problems you need to solve? What are the issues that you've got in the business right now that this role is going to solve for you? And what are those skill sets that we need to have? It is irrelevant whether somebody is 22 years old or 62 years old, makes no difference. What we're looking at is that capability that is there. And from a candidate perspective, that's what we have to bear in mind. So we have to try and both ignore the fact that that's going to happen. So we have to make sure that we do, but also set yourself up to think, look, I know there are going to be instances where people are even unconsciously going to start thinking this. How do I engage in the market? How do I create my content, create my visibility without this being a problem? And there's something we can do that will absolutely help that. Hi, Debbie. I think the diversity info should be optional. And my goodness, with the amount of roles folk are applying for now, dreadfully repetitive. They should be optional. You don't necessarily have to provide that. In theory, they should be able to, that you don't have to put that in there. So like we had earlier where we put in 010101, it will still push you through because it is an optional thing to do. That you can't be that you have to provide this data in order to be considered for the role, because then absolutely you'll then step over the line in terms of that legal obligation and what we need to do from that side. Hello, LinkedIn user. The biggest issue that I see is getting through the ATS. You already mentioned the Workday class action suit in the US. Absolutely right. Look, and let's just sort of take it back from the ATS. You know, the ATS is just simply a database. It is there to collect your applications, and it provides it there, and it aids the recruiter to be able to go through that and understand, okay, who's applied for the role? Let's have a look at their CV. What do I need to do? The ATS is not going to be rejecting you. There are some tools that are coming in with, we all talk about AI, that absolutely, are we going to get to a point where it's going to be helping with search? It's going to be selecting different candidates. That is coming. And there are tools already that do that. But in theory, again, what they should be doing is they will put a disclaimer up to tell you that that is what's happening, that we are using some form of AI in order to assess candidates. And usually what it'll say in the disclaimer is, but all final decisions will be made by a human. No AI will make that decision to reject or accept. So you shouldn't be getting that. It shouldn't be happening. And if there are any circumstances, it's super rare for it. So be reassured, if there is any reassurance, if you're getting rejections or no one's coming back to you, it's a human doing it. It's the issue is a human issue. So absolutely, it can probably give prompts to that human, but it will be that as well. Debbie, hi. I had an interview start by saying, before I'm even reading this, my heart sinks as soon as anyone says, I had an interviewer tell me something. Let's get to it. You have more experience than both of us together, referring to the interview panel. Brilliant. That's always good. It's always good to know. But I think that's, yes, absolutely, that should sound alarm bells from a recruitment perspective. If I knew that was what was happening or being said there, I'd be having a very quiet word with that interviewer to help guide them as to what the hats they should be saying. And that's probably not the best start to do it. But in some respects, that's good. Look, I would look at it from a positive point of view. First and foremost, they can see you are highly skilled. Highly skilled. If they're already saying that, they are. Clearly, they probably have got a little bit of inferiority there. Everybody has it. We all have our own imposter syndromes, a little voice there that will tell us one thing or another. And hiring managers are no different. They will do that as well. So when you're in that interview situation, that's when you need to look and think, okay, how do I do this in a way to demonstrate my skill sets, but also demonstrate the capability I have from a character perspective to be able to cope with that, the dynamic that, yeah, look, you might be, but I'm going to be learning something from you as well. You know, it's a two-way street. I don't have a monopoly on being right and knowing everything. Absolutely not. Just as they don't. So there's a bit of work that you're going to have to do there in order to try and reassure that panel that you're not seen as a threat to their career, because that's probably what they're worried about when they're asking that. To be fair, it's very easy to work out how old the person is from their CV. That is a great, great comment. And that brings us now on to, look, what are the things that you can do to do that? Absolutely. And I'm sure that all of us will probably know there are ways, if you really want to, I can look at a LinkedIn profile, I can look at a CV, and I could, if I really wanted to, work out pretty much how old you are. Absolutely, I could do that if I was minded to do that. There's lots of different ways to do it. The obvious one is that you just look at the time that somebody had gone to university. If you've got the dates in there that when you went to university, you can work it out. You can see the date that you left. You're probably going to be 21-ish when you left, maybe 20. And then you just do the calculation. And in your head, it's not going to be too difficult to work out where it is. If you've got somebody who started work in 1984, you're going to know how old they are. You can sort of, again, work this out. There's lots of different ways you can do it. And if somebody is minded to do that, they're going to do that as well. And it's interesting because there's a big debate as well about what should I or shouldn't I put on my CV? What should I put on my LinkedIn profile? What shouldn't I do? First and foremost, I think it's really important to reassure everybody on this call. You should not be there trying to hide your capability or trying to downplay your skills or to downplay your value. Absolutely not. You do not need to do that. But what you do need to do is to maybe how you present yourself is in a way where it minimizes any chance of unconscious bias. Because I'm going to give the favor that I don't think there's hordes of hiring managers and recruiters thinking I'm refusing to hire anybody who's over 40. I'm not interested in them. There might be one or two, but the majority of them won't do that. And especially within recruiting, they know from an HR perspective what you should and shouldn't be doing. But there are all of these natural unconscious biases that can happen. And there are certain things that can help trigger that. So last week, for instance, we talked about that when we had Fergal on and we did the live profile, which thanks again, Fergal. It was a great session. I got some amazing feedback from everybody as well. So I really appreciate it as well. But there was one bit on there where Fergal had put on 30 plus years of experience. And that is a classic one where I think I would always advise, don't put in there X amount of years of experience, because for two different reasons. I know that, first of all, that we were always conditioned to say that the more years that you've had of doing something, the more valuable that is. And that seems to have gone away. It's almost the counter to that particular train of thought. What it is now is that you need to be looking at that and thinking, okay, how do I re-describe that? It's about skill sets, because you might well have had 30 years of experience of doing something. Of course, in brackets, you might have been doing something really poorly for 30 years. And it's no, a year in tenure is not a good assessment of your skill set. What we need to look at is what the skills are, specifically what you have, what the problems that company has, and how you solve that. So when you have your CV or your LinkedIn profile, rather than concentrating on what you did and how many years you did that, always look at what were the problems you solved, what were the businesses that how much profitability did you increase? All of those different areas, always looking at adding value the whole time, rather than just listing what it is that you did. Fergal, hi, great to see you. Now updated my CV to extensive experience. Exactly, extensive experience. So that then takes away the number. It takes away any of that thought process that people might look and think 30 years, 30 plus years. How old must they be? Well, they must have started work at around 20, so they're going to be over 50. And should we be hiring people at that age? They're like twice my age, and should they have that? Absolutely. It makes a big difference. And I know for a lot of us, you would look at it and think quite naturally, why should I have to be doing this at this age? Why should I have to be hiding who I am? Why should that be an issue? It is illegal. It shouldn't be doing that. I accept all of that. But in actual fact, what we need to do is just making sure that we're presenting it and keeping it on value, keeping it on what you can do for that business as well. Andrew, personally, I feel that if you have been in a role for a long time and haven't had to interview for a long time, meaning that you are a little rusty, but still very capable, that the younger applicants are firstly more cost effective, but also likely to have more interview experience as they are in an early stage of their career. Look, it's a couple of good points there. I think first of all, let's talk about the younger applicants are firstly more cost effective. I think that is an element that absolutely has played a part over the last few years. I think that a lot of businesses, as they're looking to mitigate their costs, to look very much, and especially at payroll, and they're looking to see, look, can I get as much experience or that I can get, or as much skill as I can get at as low cost as that I can get. That happens a lot, and it happens the flip side. So on entry-level roles, how many entry-level roles are there for grads, etc., where they're demanding 3 years worth of experience using X tool and this tool and that tool, where clearly if it's an entry-level role, how on earth are you meant to have got that? But that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to maximize as much as they can do and trying to pay as little as possible. So there is some of that as well. Again, we can overcome that by trying to look at what is the value that you bring. And the value you bring is by understanding what the problems are that need to be solved for that business, for that particular business area, for that particular one there, and what else you need to have on that. And the second point that you had there was also about that are likely to have more interview experience as they are in an early stage of their career. That is absolutely true as well. For sure, we're living in a world where the longevity in roles, gone are the days where people have been in a role for 20 years and they don't move and they stay where it is. But they'll still have people who have quite a bit of tenure. But for sure, there's still going to be a situation where people might have been in a role for upwards of 10 years and they will not have interviewed for it. And that absolutely can be a challenge for them. And that can be an area when you've got to interview where you have to demonstrate that capability, how you approach the role. And I think a lot of people will look at things like, I'm sure we've heard of this, about energy, about passion, about how you can deliver, all of those kind of things that they associate with people who are younger, which is why all of that kind of language shouldn't be in job descriptions. It shouldn't be pushed out there because it can have that connotation of a protected characteristic that we shouldn't do. I have to say, I know tons of people over 50 and plenty of them can outpace anyone half their age as well. So look, the age thing is completely ludicrous. But again, if you understand where the potential issue can be, that gives you the opportunity to be able to overcome that before it ever happens. So that's absolutely right. Nana, great to see you. Enjoy your murder mystery. Whatever that is, I think it's really good. But I can see that you're off, and it's great to see you coming in as well. So look, what can we then do from a point of view of how do we minimize age as an issue? What can we do? What are the practical areas that we can take care of, and what we can actually happen? Look, we've talked a little bit about what happens inside that hiring process. So the little judgments that people will make based on CVs, on what they might see on the LinkedIn profile, what people just generally making assumptions. And a lot of that, as I said, is unconscious. It's the sort of the bias that happens before an interview even starts, that what they will look at when they look at your CV, they've got your CV here, what's going on here, what's happened. Oh, well, they've got 6 pages worth because they've been in the marketplace for a long time. So my expectation subconsciously is they're going to be old. So again, look at managing what you put in your CV there. Do you need to be putting, you don't need to put line by line every single thing that you've ever done and feel tempted to oversell everything. That's why I always recommend, I think it's important if you're using your strategic applications, because we're not doing mass applications, strategically, that you are strategic with your CV as well. Understand the job, look at the job description, what the company does, the values that they have, what kind of problems do you think they're trying to solve, and match that in there. They're probably not going to be interested in your first job that you did 20 years ago, 30 years ago, where you were doing X, Y, Z for some small company that no longer exists. No one's going to be interested. There's not going to be anything really relevant or transferable skill from 20, 30 years ago that you're going to bring there. For sure, that has made you who you are now. It's part of your story. Part of your story is what you can talk about in an interview. but that's not necessarily on your CV or your LinkedIn profile, which is your gateway to get the interview in the first place. So don't feel tempted that you need to sell everything in your CV. That's not what it's there to do. So ensure that you sort of change that to make sure that that happens. Then we've talked about those sort of hidden signals that can trigger bias, like graduation dates. If you take them off, if you don't need to have them on there. So on your LinkedIn profile, you don't have to put them in there as well. It's an optional, so you don't have to. If you wish to take them off, take them off. The same in your CV. You don't have to have them in there. I appreciate there are some applications, unfortunately, where it forces you to do it. But if you don't, try that I think it was David that did with the 010101. You can put that in if you really want to. So, again, don't feel like you have to do that. It's important also of what you're referencing. Now, if you're talking a lot about the fact of I was working really hard with Lotus Notes and this, is that relevant now? No, it's not going to be relevant now. Check on in terms of the old technology references. It's really important that it's not just your CV, but your LinkedIn profile as well. Are you up to date with your technology skills in there? Now, I know that everybody's talking about AI. AI is the thing that it is. Are you doing your skills on AI? Have you updated that? Have you taken the courses on LinkedIn and put that in there? The evidence is really, really clear that people with relevant skill sets and the modern cutting edge skill sets on their LinkedIn profile are far more likely to move to interview and get hired than those that don't. So if you haven't done that, make sure you update that. Make sure you put that in there. I think it's really important. Also, long CVs. We have that debate, and I think it might have been last week that somebody asked about how long can it be? Can it be 4 pages long? I've been told it should be 1 or 2 or 3. At the end of it, I don't care whether it's 1 page long or 4 pages long. It shouldn't make any difference. If your CV is more than 4 pages long, you need to start cutting that back, because yes, that will be an issue. If you are making strategic applications, then absolutely people are not going to be wading through. And as soon as they see, bear in mind that a recruiter, when they've got thousands of CVs that they need to be looking at, and they suddenly see the counter of 6, 8, 10 pages long, I am sure their heart will sink, thinking, I've got to try and get through that. And they've got to try and flick through it to see what it is and that finds out about you. And then, of course, secondly, what it can do is it can trigger some of that bias that we don't want it to do. So it is a skill in itself to be able to précis information and be able to show that to people in a shortened format. Don't feel tempted to stick it on 1 page and you just suddenly are putting as much information in there as well as possible, because then that can be counterintuitive, that what it actually does is it might be just 1 page, but it's so unreadable that it means that they're just going to move on from you. So, it's important to look at it that way. There's a couple of other areas as well before we move on. One is email addresses. I know there is something there. If you've got a really, really old email address, again, it can probably trigger bias. It's unlikely, in the big run of things, it won't do. But if you've got lots of other things there, it can do. I would always recommend, if you are job searching, I would create a bespoke email for you, a brand new one, and it is 1 email box and it's just for your jobs. That is it. You will never lose sight. You're never going to have a message that goes into spam or anything else like that, or just gets lost by the hundreds of other messages trying to sell you goodness knows what that you get from any email address that you probably have of any length of time. So create a special one. It doesn't take long to do it. Put it on there, and then that's my job searching email. That's the one I know. That's the one I'm giving out to everybody, and I can control everything. And I think it's really a good tip to do from that point of view. The language that we use can unintentionally age us. I do that a lot, especially when my kids will look at me and say, "What on earth are you talking about? What are you saying? Why are you speaking like that?" We are living in a time where everything's moving super quickly. And so again, try and look at it a little bit. Try and work out the ways that you can do and be more relevant in the speech that is today. It's about small adaptations when you're getting both in what you're writing and also in what you're putting forward to the businesses that you go forward through as well. And then the final bit on this different area here we'll look at is that difference between looking experienced and looking commercially current. And there's a fine line between it. And this is what I mean by that. We talked about this experience, great experience. I've got lots of years. I've got this, that, the other. I'm looking commercially current. And what I mean by commercially current is if as a business owner, I'm looking at taking somebody on for myself, I will have that because I've got an issue in my business that I need to solve. It might be, I need more sales. I need to make more profit. I need to get control of my finance. I've got a problem with bad debt. I need to get somebody who can go out there and get the people who are not paying me on time. I have a problem with marketing is that I don't know how to do any of the new social media. I need to get somebody who needs that. They're all problems that I need to try and solve. That's what you need to try and position both in your content that you're putting out there on LinkedIn, in your profile, and indeed on your CV when you're strategically applying. Look commercially current. David, on that point about email, I had one recently that would not accept a Gmail email address. I've seen that as well a couple of times. Usually that is because Gmail has in their wonderful way that they've said to the organization or where it is, they need to solve a particular issue technically. I don't know what that is, but they do need to do that. So look, check that as well and see which is going to be the most. If you're using that, it should be absolutely fine. Jane, yes, I wish I had set up an email address at the beginning of my search. I'm sure my Hotmail can be off-putting. I know. I still have my Hotmail account as well. And I had that, crikey. When did I first get that Hotmail? I mean, it was in the 90s. I know that. And it does, even though you can still get Hotmail, it still does a little bit. And I think it's absolutely worth doing. And to my mind, I think what's useful about it is not just in terms of age, but it just is more efficient to me that if you have a dedicated one for your job search, bear in mind, job searching is not like it was 15, 20 years ago, where you'll get your choice of jobs super quickly. You're in it for a long haul. And all the things that I advocate in branding yourself, creating visibility, engaging, networking, doing your LinkedIn profile and strategically applying it's not a magic cure. It's not a magic pill. I wish it was. But what it absolutely will do is get you a much better chance of getting spoken to, creating conversations, and actually getting hired quicker. And by quicker, it means, look, you're not going to be looking for the next year by doing that. If all you're doing is relying on applications only, it's a long haul unless you're lucky. And that's the point. And what we're doing by doing all of this is minimizing the luck element. What you're doing is taking more control, and it's sensible control. It's realistic control. And so the little things like having a dedicated email address, we're trying to minimize any of these issues. And age is absolutely an issue that we need to minimize for it as well. So what can we do to sort of really position ourselves better? And especially when we get to a certain age. I know it's difficult to believe, but I am actually in that category as well. I know it's hard to believe that. There are no filters on this. Unfortunately, this is what I look like. So I am what I am with it. But look, you've got to try and move it to be focusing on relevance rather than history. I know I've said this a lot, but I really will emphasize that. And I know we are all very proud of what we've achieved and what we've done in our life. And absolutely we should do. But there's a difference between relevance and history. And relevance is going back to what that commercial value is over chronology. That it's trying to move away from I did this, X, Y, Z was my job between this date, and that's and these were my tasks that I had to do from here. Forget that. What we need to be doing is looking at what the commercial value is. What is it that you bring to me and you're going to solve for me? The more that you can do that, the more you will be successful. And the more you position yourself on LinkedIn to be that, the problem solver, the person who is an expert in your area, in your business, in your market, that provides great insights and great value for free out on LinkedIn, the more likely you are that people will be speaking to you and want to talk to you, to try and pick your brain, to try and understand what I can do to try and help my business. And when you start having those conversations, that's when you start to get access to the jobs that are not posted. That's when you start to get those hidden ones. And it's the difference between confidence and defensiveness. Because I suspect that a lot of us, myself included at some point in my life, get super defensive about it because you're aware of the fact we're not getting any younger. And I think everybody's starting to think a bit like this. And therefore, I'm on the back foot and I'm trying to defend all the time. And again, what that will actually do is make the situation worse. What we've got to do is show that confidence of where it is. And networking and visibility absolutely will be able to help you with that. It's the sort of avoiding that experience dumping. And whether that is online, on CV, in interview, of just feeling I need to tell you all the things I've done because I'm overselling. I'm so experienced. I've got all of this stuff. No, make it relevant for what that is. And that also deals when people say, like you had there in that interview, you've got more experience than all of us combined. Because what you're actually doing is, rather than talking about all that experience, you're showing the problems you solve. And what you want to see is for them to actually sit there and go, the introduction, rather than you've got more experience than all of us combined, you've solved all the problems that we've had and we're experiencing right now. I really want to understand what that is. How did you do that? That's when you've made a difference. And that's when you've moved way away from the experience dumping straight the way onto commercial value. And that's where it will make a massive difference for you. Okay, so look, we're coming very much towards the end. I think it's been a great session, some really good questions. I wanted to specifically answer some of those questions as well. And I think there's a couple of different things that we want to see. If there are any other questions you've got, please let me know. We can either see if we've got any still left in the comments that we can go to. If not, put your questions in here. I will go back through all of them and I will answer everybody's questions in that over a later date. It might take a couple of days. Maybe when it's really super hot in the garden, I'll go and do that. My final message is for you. Look, if you're going out there and searching, be super confident with it. Don't hide the fact. You don't need to hide the fact of what your age is and what it is, and don't worry about that. It is about your skill set. You've all got great skills in what you do, and we're all slightly different. You know, whatever one of you might have is going to be highly skilled in finance, another one in operational work, in business operations, in marketing, in sales, in recruiting. You're all going to be experienced in different things. The trick, if there is a trick, is that you've got to show that and show that visibility to the world. Let people know where it is, and specifically for your target audience. And LinkedIn's going to be really, really good at helping you do that. And so what it means is optimize your LinkedIn profile, show your skill sets, show the value that you bring, and then start to pitch that out to the world. Create your content, put the posts out there, make sure that you demonstrate what it is. Go onto your target audience and start commenting on their posts. Start engaging with them, and make sure, if you're nervous about creating content, nervous about putting posts out there, then concentrate on comments, because commenting is a fantastic way to develop all of that. And that, combined with strategic applications, will absolutely help you to get out there and make a difference. And there aren't enough people creating this kind of value, insightful content on LinkedIn. So your opportunity is still super big to do that. And LinkedIn want you to do that. They want people to give insightful, valuable, skill-based information out there. It will reward you to do it. So best of luck doing it. I hope you all have a fantastic weekend, wherever you are in the world. If you don't have a long weekend, I sympathize with you. If you do have one, enjoy it. Obviously, enjoy the sun. I hope it goes well for you. I will see you same time next week. We will be going through some more sessions here as well. As ever, I will be looking for some volunteers. We'll be looking for another profile audit. In particular, what we're going to concentrate on next week is specifically on content creation. What can you do to create this value? What are the type of posts that you can have? So if you are nervous about creating posts, or that you have created posts and it just not worked very well, let me know. And if you really feel brave enough, and don't worry, you'll get a nice get hired mug, and you won't be critiqued too badly. We're very, very, very friendly. Let us know, put in there, volunteer there, and we'll have you come up on stage next week, and we'll have a look at your profile and see what we can do to help. In the meantime, thank you very much. Enjoy the weekend. We'll speak next week. Take care. Cheers.